It's not particularly brave or controversial to say that politicians lie. In fact, that seems to be almost a default statement, a unifying cry from all sides of the political spectrum. And yet it becomes that much more serious when not only do the politicians lie about vague political promises, bribes, or backroom deals, which are most certainly involved in today's case, but outright spew lies about verifiable, easily accessible information, do so against the interests of the people and entirely to further their own political careers and expand their influence, even at risk of handing that influence over to hostile forces. Worse still, when those lies find people who believe them. My name is Walter, and when I started this series, I tried to make it clear that I would not let personal political biases get in the way of explaining Latvia's political processes, but also said I would not let destructive populism slide. Today, I stand by those words. I am not here to do what some already do, calling those who appear earnestly against the Istanbul Convention as wife-beaters and Soviet-minded and whatever other terms have been thrown around. Because the simple reality is that whatever political opinion you hold, if you've come to the conclusion that leaving this convention is for the good of Latvia and its people, then you've likely been horribly misled by those voices in politics which shout the loudest and benefit the most from dividing our nation. Reality is that most people have not read the convention, and of those that have read any part of it, most have not given it deeper than surface-level thought, or bothered to learn of its effects or meaning. After all these politicians went up to the Saeima podium and talked about wokeism and Donald Trump and transitioning children and whatever else. But however you feel about any of that, about any of those topics, the simple, undeniable truth is that the convention has absolutely nothing to do with any of that on any level. I don't want to bark and moan and lament how all is lost because of a portion of the population has been convinced of this. Instead, I want to make it clear just how deceptive party members have been in an effort to appear as though they are doing just about anything to the benefit of the nation. I will be summarizing statements made by said party members here, providing necessary context, and showing you just that. The first bit of context would be what the convention actually is. First opened for signature in 2011, the document is fully titled Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence. It's a document primarily focused on violence against women, but covers domestic violence and general abuse more broadly, and defines necessary legislature and government support, including providing shelters and support services, as well as making illegal acts of physical, sexual, and psychological abuse, stalking, forced abortion, forced marriage, forced sterilization, and others. The loudest screaming and shouting has come due to the inclusion of gender identity in the original text of the document, and translation of it in Latvian as sociālais dzimums or social gender. LSM asked members of multiple parties to express what in their mind the term social gender actually means. Evenicle, representing the United List, shut the topic down pretty much immediately, saying herself that the convention is primarily about violence and any terms in regards to sex and family are already present in the Constitution, which, mind you, is entirely true. That hasn't stopped her and her party from signing in support of denouncing the convention, somehow putting her statements in line with the opinions of National Union, Latvia First, and Stability, with members of the parties having to say that the convention goes against there being two genders, according to a seemingly very confused Jānis Vitsenbergs from the National Union, that the convention defines what gender is, and that they ask the progressives what it means, which they have answered here, by the way, and in other statements and interviews from Stability's Svetlana Chulkova, and the peak of it all from Linda Liepiņa from LPV, who went on to say that this being the first intentional document to define social gender means that sooner or later, in order to avoid discrimination according to this treaty, laws will need to change to accommodate this definition of gender in law, and that would also mean making same-sex marriage legal as well. This statement is frankly completely schizophrenic, and I will unpack it piece by piece, but start by telling you what the convention actually states. The following definition of the term gender is provided in Article 3 of the Convention. Gender means the socially constructed roles, behaviors, activities, and attributes that a given society considers appropriate for women and men. In other words, within the context of the document, it refers to social roles and effectively stereotypes. It sort of prevents certain excuses from even being attempted to be made, such as, well, if she didn't want to be smacked, she should have made him that sandwich, or that bullying got to be excused because someone didn't fit a specific social norm, with something as simple as a girl having short hair or a boy having long hair. That is what it means. Thus, further within that context, gender identity doesn't really need further definition, nor would it put any pressure on the government to adjust laws to accommodate a definition which is already included within the convention, merely as how one identifies and presents themselves in relation to those social roles or stereotypes. Latvian laws already also include clauses that prohibit various forms of violence and discrimination based on things like religion or race, without needing to separately define these terms within those same sets of laws because they aren't a goddamn dictionary. The bizarre segue into same-sex marriage is also just a brutal means of trying to fearmonger their voters about the globo-homo agenda, starting with the aforementioned reality that the convention would put no such pressure on local lawmakers, or that at no point does the convention say or even imply anything about transitioning, or that gender transition and gay marriage, despite being adjacent issues, tend to not cross paths, as those would be defined by two separate laws. Hell, discarding the narrative about the woke decadent West wanting to force all of this on little old Latvia, you could as lawmakers construct any sets of internal clauses, whether you wanted to separate gender and sex or not, whether or not you want same-sex marriage or not, and whether or not same-sex and same-gender marriage are to be considered the same thing, and whether either of them are to be recognized. This has been echoed by lawmakers and officials not just from the west of Latvia, but from those in Estonia and Ukraine. And other signatories include Romania and Moldova, Italy, and almost the entirety of the Balkans. So if you well and truly believe all of these countries have fallen for the woke agenda and are just on the cusp of legalizing gay marriage and gender transition, then you might be having a woke brain tumor. When further pressed about transitioning being mentioned in regards to the convention, Vīksna once again deflected and said that's not what it's about, and I'll be honest, gave a slightly more baffling answer than the rest for why she had signed to denounce the convention, saying that she actually felt not enough was done to find employment for women, which forced them to return to their abusers, and that's why she's against the convention, which is frankly completely bizarre as a stance, and reeked more of an excuse to align with the party. It makes no sense to say, there is an unresolved issue, so we should eliminate the framework for solving other issues too. Ingmar Slīdaka, also elected from United List, responded to the question of why he supported the bill with, "Because I wanted to."
Kāpēc Latvijai būtu jāizstājās? Tāpēc, ka man tā gribās.
What a brilliant representative of the people he's turned out to be. National Union and Latvia First, meanwhile, appear to be in cahoots with their explanation for why this is all very relevant to the convention somehow. Their claim is that it's all the first step in the agenda, paving the path for wokeism and genderism through Latvia First's previous, fictional, claim regarding lawmaking, as well as what the convention suggests regarding education. Again, this section tackles that previous definition of gender and suggests education shouldn't involve stereotyping men and women's roles in society. Effectively, this means that you shouldn't be telling kids that girls belong in the kitchen and boys should go to war, and has absolutely nothing to do with transition. Again. Other claims, of course, talked about how Latvian laws are already enough, or that this isn't a serious issue anymore. Some quotes and debunking here courtesy of Marcivaskis on Instagram. Stability Deputy Salimov said that we live in a safe environment and that there is no danger to women. Meanwhile, over 4,000 cases of domestic abuse are brought to the attention of police yearly, which of course doesn't include any unreported cases. And just prior to ratifying the convention, Latvia had the highest homicide rate in Europe, with the majority being women. Zivtiņš from Latvia First echoed sentiments from many members of this 56 deputy bloc, talking about how Latvia doesn't need foreign assistance on the matter and can do it all on our own, seemingly unaware of how hundreds of millions of euros are invested into our country yearly by foreign funds to combat this abuse, construct crisis centers, and establish helplines. They seem equally unaware of what Latvian foreign investors unions are highly aware of, Namely, that this internal bickering over wokeism and whatever else these parties come up with is completely irrelevant to the foreign investors seeking potential opportunities in Latvia. Particularly heinous in the case of Latvia First, represented by Ziltiņš here, somehow hundreds of millions of euros in funds to protect Latvia's citizens and hundreds of millions more in potential investor money isn't worth the same as money from a Middle Eastern oil tycoon wanting to build a giant ugly office block in our capital's historic center. Fuck them so hard. Latvian conservatives aren't the first to bring up these false claims with next to no basis in the content of the convention, and it takes no effort to see why it's come to this now. With an election next year, the parties in question are doing all they can to drum up support, with the Greens and Farmers in particular doing this despite their coalition mates in New Unity and Progressives, due to some slights regarding what trees they're allowed to chop down, for example. Despite the fact that they were in support of this bill previously and had their people talking about how this is actually just about protecting women from violence. You might not be surprised that they're not providing many comments now. That said, it kind of serves New Unity right for dragging the corrupt corpse of the Greens and Farmers along with them for all these years, even as they've insisted on preserving the importance of the convicted Lamberts in party. Over 5,000 people came out to the streets of Riga the day before the final vote, and tens of thousands had signed a petition against the law. And yet these 56 people in Saeima decided that they would much rather side with those 20-odd people that showed up the day of the vote to proclaim support. Which, by the way, was extra embarrassing as this was organized by the out-of-Saeima party New Latvians and Sovereign Power. Like, I know these guys are idiots, but it would have been so easy to just not do this and remind everyone that nobody likes you. All is not lost, though. I was just preparing to do a video on foreign affairs, actually. And if you recall from my video on presidents, the president has the power to return this law to a second vote in Saeima, and failing that, demand a referendum. Right now, almost 50,000 people have signed a petition on Mana Balss LV to demand the president to do just that. I will be linking that in the description and urging all of you who are Latvian citizens to go there and sign the petition. You can expect me to report further on this story as it develops. I hope that at least some of these parties, namely at least United List and National Union, will remember some of their dignity and maintain at least the slightest bit of integrity and rescind their votes. If not, well, there goes my opinion of them, at least.